Feeling sleepy? I'm your host, Mr. Creepy. Don't fall into the wishing well. Listen to my stories from hell. Ghosts in the afterlife. The werewolf who chomped his wife. A headless dentist on a ATV. The chicken corpse haunting KFC. Ever seen a vampire on a plane? A zombie slurping brains? While you're in your bedroom smoking Indo, didn't you notice the ghoul at your window? Sit back and relax your bones. Get onto your laptops or your phones. The YouTube address FYI is Mr. Creepy's time to die.
Bad evening. Tonight's story is about a group of friends who did some exploring in Southeast Asia, which led them to a little cliffhanger. In a small town somewhere in Southeast Asia, a group of friends made their way up a rarely used mountain pass. They stopped upon arriving at their favorite place to hang out, a hidden spot somewhere on the mountain. They wasted no time proceeding to laugh and drink the night away, but just as they were about to head into town, a bit of earth suddenly broke from a small cliff wall nearby. Must have been from all the rain the past few days, the group figured, but as they took a closer look, they saw a surprising sight. Behind the mound of dirt stood a statue made of stone. Despite being buried under dirt for an unknown amount of time, it looked to be in excellent condition. The unique appearance of the statue, however, was a bit jarring. Even though it had the features of a person, it also had 6 arms, which held knives in some of its hands, and around its neck a carving of a necklace with human skulls, also made out of stone. Though he wasn't quite sure, one of the men, Bo, told the others that he thought the statue was supposed to represent a guardian from an old religion that no longer existed. Regardless of whatever it was, the group thought that was as good as a time as any to leave. However, one of the men, Kai, had other plans. He told the others that they should try to bring the statue back to town. He thought that maybe they could sell it for a little bit of money. The others tried to convince him otherwise. They told Kai that desecrating the statue might bring them bad luck. But Kai wasn't hearing any of that. In a bit of rage, he threatened violence if they refused. Intimidated, everybody eventually gave in. They grabbed some rope nearby that was laying in an area full of other discarded junk. After tying the rope around the torso, the group used all their might in an effort to bring the statue down, but it wouldn't budge. If all the men weren't so drunk, they might have realized from the get-go that the statue was connected to a foundation of stone. After a few minutes, with no success, the group fell to the ground, exhausted. Even though they failed, most of them were actually relieved. They believed that they had just avoided bringing bad luck upon themselves. Kai, on the other hand, didn't share his friends' sentiments. Angry, Kai walked up a slope to get to the top of the cliff. His friends, having no idea what he was doing, watched their friend disappear from view. But not before long, Kai emerged from atop the hill, rolling what appeared to be a large rock. He eventually made his way to the edge of the cliff, staring straight down at the statue below. His friends, realizing what he was about to do, desperately cried to him to reconsider. But Kai ignored their pleas. With one last calculated push, Kai sent the large rock plummeting right down towards the statue. As the rock violently crashed onto the statue, the impact caused its head to completely break off, decapitating it. Kai's friends could do nothing but stare in shock as the statue's head rolled onto the ground nearby. A weird feeling of unease suddenly permeated over all of them. Kai, on the other hand, was only too pleased to collect his prize from the ground. As Kai was busy admiring the statue's head in his arms, his friends made it clear to him that they had no intention of spending the night there. Not wanting to carry the statue's head himself the whole way down in the morning, Kai agreed to join his friends. After packing their things and putting out the fire, the group eventually departed the area, leaving the headless figure of the statue behind. Back at their small town, the group went about their daily lives, but not only had they not spoken about the incident, Kai's friends had also refused to hang out at his place ever since. A few nights later, while one of the friends, Ro, was in the middle of eating dinner, a disturbance caught his attention. His eyes slowly followed the sound of heavy footsteps on the grounds outside of his home. Ro became overtly troubled when the footsteps stopped abruptly at his back door. But just as he conjured up the courage to investigate, something suddenly started to slam against the door. After just a few strikes, the door frame already looked as if it was about to give in. Stricken with fear, Ro headed in the opposite direction, running straight out his front door. But after only taking a few steps outside, he suddenly screamed out in agony. He collapsed to the floor in excruciating pain. When he looked, he saw the stomach-churning sight of broken pieces of glass embedded into the bottom of his bare feet. To his horror, he soon realized that the ground outside his front door looked to be covered with pieces of glass from beer bottles. Ro screamed out for help. Unfortunately for him, his closest neighbors were all elderly and more than a stone's throw away from his place. As he continued to desperately cry out, Ro tried his best to crawl away, but his attempt came to a dead stop when something forcefully grabbed his ankles. Before he could even look behind, he was violently pulled back and dragged across the ground full of broken beer bottles. Ro screamed as the pieces of glass shred into his flesh. The next morning, Kai and the others learned of news that something awful might have happened to Ro. Even though Ro himself was nowhere to be found, a neighbor had contacted authorities after coming across what looked to be a crime scene. Thinking that this was proof of a curse for desecrating the statue, Kai's friends begged him to return the head. Irate at the fact that his friends would even believe in such things, not only did Kai refuse, he told them he's been hiding it in a secret place where they'd never find it. Later that night, while trying to deal with the disappearance of his friend, one of the men, Nur, tried to drown his fears and worries at the local bar. But after having blacked out due to carelessly drinking one too many, he had to be awakened by the bartender. As he stumbled outside, Noor discovered that he was all alone on the streets. Like he usually did, he passed through a field of tall grass to get to his home. It wasn't too long, however, when he started to get a paranoid feeling, like there was somebody else in the tall grass with him. Noor decided to hasten his pace, but just as he did, he suddenly heard the sound of somebody barreling towards him. Noor screamed. Still a little inebriated, he did his best to stay on his feet as he ran. With no intention of looking behind him, Noor kept his eyes straight ahead. To his relief, he eventually saw the sight of his home as he neared the edge of the field. But just as he was right about to exit the tall grass, something viciously snatched him. Be sure to stay tuned for part 2 of Curse of the Statue.
Mr. Creepy here. Friends, we don't care what you thought of tonight's horror story. If you don't stab the like button and slash the subscribe bell, this will happen to you. No! No!